I was saying I was invited to Yellowknife to speak a couple years ago, and I flew there and was on the smallest plane ever. It could have fit in my living room, and my nerves were shot. And I got there, and I looked, and I was the last speaker. And the first speaker was Pinball Clemens. And I don't know if any of you have seen Pinball Clemens speak. He does push-ups on the stage. He comes with his great big championship ring. I came down to watch him, and I thought, I'm going to fake sick. There's no way I'm going after this guy. I tried doing cartwheels in my hotel room. I thought, I've got an Avon ring I can show people, but nobody's really going to care. So I came down to see Matt speak yesterday, and I kind of had the same feeling. I thought, oh, God, I'm the last speaker, and my credentials are that I'm a crazy hockey mom. So here we go. So thank you. Appreciate it. So I want to thank Peter Woods and Hockey Manitoba for having me here today. I love that it's called the Growing the Game season opener. And I love that because there needs to be changes and we need to evolve because I believe our kids are changing too. And the one thing I can say about hockey, and one of the things that I love the most, is that when my son was at the arena, it was an hour that he held a hockey stick in his hand instead of his cell phone. And it was probably, at that point in his life, the only time I could get him without his cell phone. And that's another way that hockey provides such positive experiences for our kids. So I want to take the opportunity to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm from a little town I'm from Ontario, and I'm right between Toronto and Ottawa. It's a place called Belleville, Ontario. So the Belleville Bulls, the OHL hockey team, came from there. So the Subins came out of there, Andrew Shaw, Andrew Raycroft. So as a mom who had pretty unrealistic expectations, when your kid is playing hockey in a town where other NHLers come out of that town, you think, God, this happens to everybody. And I remember when he was 9 years old, we'd been at a tournament, and he had a really good tournament. He got player of the game. So naturally at 9, I knew he was going to the NHL. It was a given. And I remember we were at a party, and never ever mix booze and hockey talk, especially if you don't know what you're talking about. And I remember we were at a party, and everybody said, how did the tournament go? And I said, it went really well. He got a shutout, and he got player of the game. And I said, we really live in the perfect spot, because when he plays for the Leafs, we can go to Toronto. It's only a couple hours. When he plays for Ottawa, we can go the other way. And my husband came out of nowhere, and he said, what did you just say? So it made for a long night for both of us. Needless to say, my son still lives in Belleville, and he never had to travel to Toronto or Ottawa. So I just wanted to tell you a little bit about our family. So this is my husband, Stu. I did try and find a picture with more booze in it, but I guess this was the best that I could do. So we've been married next year for 25 years. He played a lot of hockey. He had a healthy outlook on hockey and what it gave to his life. He was a good athlete. I wasn't. So the combination of the two of us as hockey parents, we came to blows a few times, to say the least. And when I was coming here, we went out for dinner on Thursday, and I said, I'm trying to think of a story that I can tell everybody so they'll be able to see just how nuts I was. So we can start off, and they'll know who they're dealing with. And he kind of got a grin on his face. I said, what are you laughing at? He said, literally tell them any story out of that book, Allyson. He said, they can open any page. So, yes, I'm here on behalf of the hockey mom, but I also wanted to say that he has spent the last few years coaching, and my son has spent the last few years coaching. And so I have been a coach's wife, and I've seen it from a whole new perspective. And I will tell you, a couple years ago, he was coaching the minor midget AAA team. It was his third year with the team. 10 of the kids on his team ended up getting drafted. It was a really good team, and a brutal, brutal year for parents. It was very hard. And I had a hard time going to watch the games and not saying much, because I'd be sitting, and I would hear people talking about the coaches, talking about him. And he would warn me. He would say, don't say anything. Just let it go. Don't say anything. And they always had a start of the year tournament, and it was always in September. And our anniversary was always on that weekend. Very romantic anniversary. So I would always go to the tournament with him. And I remember the one day, they had 2 games, so we had a couple of hours to go for dinner. And we get in the elevator, it's him and we're about to go for dinner. And right as the elevator door is shutting, I just see hands. And the door opens. And in walks a hockey mom, one of the hockey moms from the team. So there's the 3 of us in the elevator, and I'm not getting that she's not having the best day. And so I said, hi, to her. And she said, hi. And she looked at my husband and she said, I need to talk to you. Elevator's doors close. And it felt like that hotel had 475 floors because it felt like it just kept going and going and going. And she said, my son didn't get enough ice time. And she went on to explain how all the other players, and she was able to name them, and went on and on and on. And he let her talk, and I was biting a bruise in my tongue at this point. And he turned to her and said, when the tournament is over, send me an email, and we'll meet about this in the right way. And that was it. That was the end of it. Finally, the elevator, the hockey mom elevator from hell, the doors opened, and we were able to go. So we got in the car, and I was mad. I was really mad. And I was saying to my husband, why does she think she has a right to do that? It's not during a game. We're in an elevator on the way to a dinner for our anniversary. We've given up our weekend. I'm just going on and on. He's saying nothing, saying nothing, saying nothing. We get to dinner. I started talking about it again. I just could not let it go. And he said to me, he kind of started to laugh, and I said, why aren't you saying anything? And he said, you were her. You were her. And he said, the only difference is you would not have let that coach out of the elevator until he promised you ice time for Brock. So this is who you're dealing with, folks, so we might as well just get it out on the table. So this is my daughter, Cora. Cora is in her 4th year university taking sociology. I just wrote an article not too long ago called The Rink Rats, and it was about the people in the family that don't play, but they're dragged from rink to rink to rink, carrying their toys behind them. And that was Cora. And I often think she went into sociology because she thought I needed a really, really good therapist at the rink most times. So this was her at her graduation. I cried the whole summer she was leaving, and this is pretty much how she felt about it. She was ready to get going for sure. And this is my son, Brock. So the book, Lessons from Behind the Glass, is based on the story of his hockey experience and my hockey experience as a mom watching him go through it. He's now 22 years old. He doesn't play anymore. When he was 18, he was a goalie. When he was 18, he started having problems with his hip. He had surgery. They weren't able to correct it. And so now he plays ball hockey. He plays out, and he says, I'm the slowest guy on the team, but he quite enjoys it. And I want to tell you a story just to let you know I am not here to lecture you. This is not a lecture. This is a public service announcement of what not to do as a hockey parent, and it's the only way to look at it. And, you know, I put the book out in 2015, so it's been 4 years, and my son started coaching, and he was only 19. He was the assistant coach of the AAA team, and he was also the goalie coach. And I hadn't been able to watch him play for a while, so I thought I'm going to come and watch his team play. So it was in our hometown, and I went, and I walked into the arena, and I was all excited and feeling very proud. And I sat down, and a lady came over to me, and she said, are you the lady that wrote Lessons from Behind the Glass? And I said, yes. And I need to premise this with, that never happens. Ever, ever, ever. So my head was this big at that point. I was like, oh, my son's coaching. Wow, whatever. We have really come full circle. Here we are. And so she's talking to me, and she said, I really liked your book. And she said, you must be proud of him. He's done well. And I'm saying, yes, I am. And I said, actually, he's the assistant coach today. And as we're talking, there is a ruckus behind us. And it's getting louder and louder, and it's coming from the bench. And so she keeps talking, and I can see my son on the bench with his foot on the bench leaning over, and he's screaming at one of the referees. And I thought, oh my God, don't turn around, don't turn around, don't turn around. So the lady turns around, and she says, which one is your son? And I said, he's the one getting the bench minor. And I was so embarrassed. Oh, I was so embarrassed. I thought, here, we've got a book out. He came with me out west to do this video series to talk about conduct in the rink, everything. And here we were, I'm watching him with great pride, and he's getting a bench minor. And I will tell you, when he came off the bench, I was sitting in the stands, and he came towards me, and I went, "Get away from me." Really, really, really good mom moment there. So the point is, it doesn't matter how much you know. It doesn't matter what your intentions are. Every time you walk into a rink, hockey provides the kind of passion that you don't see coming sometimes. And it brings out the worst in people, and it can bring out the best in people. And I think, honestly, we just need to practice. We just need to remind ourselves why we're there. So I'm here today because I want to help. I want to help parents find a way to enjoy the experience and to see it for what it is. An opportunity to watch and be with your kids as they do something they love. I'm here because as the wife of a coach, I'm here to tell you that I'm working very hard to raise awareness to parents about the time and work that goes into being a coach, about the right time and the right way to approach a coach as a parent, and about the right time to take a step back, As Matt said yesterday, the most important relationship is that between a coach and a player, right? And I think sometimes coaches take a lot of abuse, and they get a lot of emails, and they get a lot of calls. And I can remember one year, and the weather was terrible, and my husband would come home, and he would work long hours, and he'd be getting in the car to go to practice, and he had to be there on time because he wanted to show the kids that example. And when I would see the parents come up and yell at him or be frustrated with him, I'd think, you're forgetting what they're doing. You're forgetting the work that goes into it. So that is something else that I'm trying to raise awareness about. In the video series, I'll talk a little bit more. We do interview some coaches, and it has some of that in it. But most importantly, I'm here because I genuinely want to make the experience for our young male and female athletes a better one, a more positive one on and off the ice. I hope my stories help all of you, and at the very least, I hope they entertain you. So Lessons from Behind the Glass is a book that I started writing while my son was still playing minor hockey. As I've said many times before, I wrote it as a form of therapy to help me get through some of my more stressful moments. We enjoyed many years in hockey, and although some games caused me great stress, they also provided my family with some incredible moments. My husband, unlike me, always had such a keen understanding of what playing hockey meant. He understood cuts, getting benched, and coaches yelling at my son. To be fair, when I say yelling at our son, what I really mean is coaches instructing him to be better. Like many parents, I found that part very difficult to watch. I hated seeing him be benched, pulled, or having to take his place as backup goalie. It bothered me so much that I would want to talk at length about it. To my husband's credit, he wouldn't give me much airtime after a game if I was busy complaining. If he got fed up, he'd tell me that if I couldn't be more positive, I shouldn't come and watch. Those were good days. That was not an option for me, so instead of sharing my complaints with him, I'd go home after games and put them down on paper. I used to think he had the worst cell phone in the world because I would text him about games, and he'd say, "Oh, I didn't get it. I didn't get it." Or I'd text him because I'd want to talk about the coaches. He'd say, "Oh, no, I didn't see that." And I'd be like, "You need a new cell phone." I would write to tell off coaches, to tell off other parents, and anyone else who I felt was to blame if my son wasn't having a good experience. This is where it gets tricky as a parent. I just said if I felt my son wasn't having a good experience. Truth was, I was writing because I wasn't having a good experience. My son, on the other hand, was still smiling during games, even as the backup goalie, still trying his best, even if they were losing, still wanting to fight for that number one spot. All the while, it was me who was struggling. I didn't see any of that until I started to put my thoughts down on paper. To be honest, I didn't see or hear much of anything in the arenas unless it had to do with my son. How much ice time he was getting, if I heard someone say he let in a bad goal, or if I heard someone say he was playing great. Those comments I believed. Those comments I heard loud and clear. The compliments made my day and provided me with many unrealistic expectations that convinced me that any criticism coming his way had to be wrong. So at the end of his minor hockey journey and after many journal entries, I tucked my notes away in a binder. I put them away and I thought, this is a journal, put the crazy in the closet, nobody else needs to know about any of this. But during the summers, my husband used to coach, and I'd have the opportunity to go and watch, and he wouldn't coach my son. And we had our kids younger than a lot of our friends, so our friends had their kids play on some of these teams. And really good people would come to the rink, and I would see how they acted at the rink. And I had some perspective because I wasn't watching my son. And I remember a specific time, a lady that I know and really respect, she freaked out on a referee, and it was like staring at a fire. I couldn't take my eyes off her. She just went off on this referee. And I was embarrassed for her, but I was embarrassed for me because I saw myself in her. I saw myself in what she was doing. And it started to make me think there might be something to this book. And if you put it out, you're going to have to put it out honestly because people need to be able to recognize themselves in this. I just didn't feel like I wanted to put out a book that said, stay positive for all the rides home. Well, I tried, I really did, and it didn't always go well. I wanted something that people could really relate to and understand, but I knew in doing that, it meant putting a very personal story out about our family. So I finally went to the closet, took out my crazy journal, and I worked on it, and I put it in book form. I had it in a binder. I didn't tell anybody. And one day, my husband was relaxing in the living room. God love that man. And I walked in. I said, I have something to tell you. And he said, okay. And I said, I've written a book. And he said, about what? Proud and excited. And I said, I wrote a book about my experience as a hockey mom. And he said, holy shit, did you tell the truth? And I said, yes. And then he said, no word of a lie. He goes, did you use my name? And I said, no, I did change the names. And he went really quiet. And I knew what a big deal this was for him. He'd played all of his life in our hometown. He'd coached in our hometown. And my son was all through this book, and my daughter as well, although my daughter said, I just sound really cute in it, so she loved it. So I left him sticky notes, I left him the book, and I said, go through and read it. And anything you don't agree with, anything you're not comfortable with, leave me a sticky note. So I went to work the next day, and I thought I was going to come home to a whole sea of sticky notes, and I came home, and I thought, oh, he hasn't even read it. It was sitting there. And before I could barely get my shoes off, he said, I read your book. And I said, okay. And he said, you need to do something with this. You need to do something with this. And the original version was honest, and it had some colorful language in it, in some parts. And he said, leave it. Don't change anything. I will tell you, once I went to get it published, they've adjusted some of that in there. But anyway, and I remember kind of panicking because I thought, oh, here we go. Here we go. We're about to embark on something. So what I realized when it was over that although I wanted to save my son from all the challenges and disappointments in hockey, I realized in doing so I would have missed out on the reward. And that was the biggest lesson I wanted people to see. That's why I wanted to write the book. What I learned was that the reward of playing hockey was the young man that came out of all these experiences. This young, articulate man who could now go into any job interview and hold his head up with confidence and know how to conduct himself. And on that note, the reward was that if he didn't get the job, he'd be able to look the employer in the face, shake their hand, and thank them for the experience. We didn't teach him that. Hockey did. Through every tryout and being cut, through every great save and bad goal, he learned how to succeed and how to live with disappointment gracefully. I wrote this book because I wanted every parent that was about to put their child into hockey to understand the value of the reward at the end. I could see that if we don't change the way parents are seeing the game, then so many of them are going to think their children failed when they didn't make it to the NHL or they didn't get that scholarship. I believe that by changing the message of why to put kids into sports, we can change parents' perception of the game, and with that, maybe we can even change our behavior during the game. What things did my son, who will never make the NHL, gain from playing hockey? Let me name a few. He gained integrity, strength, friendship, and to me, he gained one of the toughest things to teach your child. He gained resilience. I realized that the only thing that made me change my behavior and come to this realization was by writing my story and by watching other parents. I knew if hockey parents were going to change their behavior, I needed to offer them the same experience through my book. So on April 19th, 2015, I launched my Lessons from Behind the Glass book. And since that day, the experience has been incredible. What started out as a journal from a crazy hockey mom has turned into a full-time job. I've been able to travel across Canada. I did get that great endorsement from Don Cherry, although he got the name of the book wrong and the city I was from wrong. Every time something happens, and I'm like, here we go, this is it. Something weird happens. So he called it Allyson Tufts from Barrie, Ontario, and I'm from Belleville. And the book is called Behind the Glass, and it's called Lessons from Behind the Glass, but I'll take it. I finally got to meet Ron McLean. So he came to Belleville. They did the hometown hockey thing. So I got invited to come to this VIP lunch before, and I thought, oh my God, so excited, can't wait. So he does his talk, and he's so good. He knows everybody, never gets any names wrong. And all of a sudden he says, is Ashley Tufts here? Ashley. I thought, you have got to be kidding. Like, I'm going to start wearing, hello, my name is. I'm like, no, but Allyson Tufts is here. So that was my experience when I met him. But anyway. So I've had the opportunity to do some traveling with the book, and I went to speak at Hockey Canada this September after it came out. And after I was done talking, Barry Petrochenko, he's the CEO of BC Hockey, he followed me out of the room, and he said, I think we should work together. I think we should do something with the lessons from your book. So we went back and forth, and we talked a lot about it. And I wanted to do something, again, honest, brutally honest. I wanted to hear from coaches. I wanted to hear from players, parents, referees, people right in the midst of the game that could say, this is what happens when there's negative parental influence on the game. This is what happens from a coach's perspective. This is what happens from a referee's perspective. I wanted to hear everything I needed to hear when I was in the experience. So I said to Barry, let's do a video series. We'll do a series of interviews. And Barry said, have you done one of these before? And I said, oh yeah, I'd never done one in my life. I'm glad he's not here. I was like, oh yeah, I've done a couple. So he flew us out to Vancouver, and my son Brock came with me. So the idea of the video series was that they would interview me as the hockey mom, and obviously him as the player, and we would open and close the videos. So when I asked my son to come out with me, he had just been injured and wasn't in a great place with hockey, but he was going into radio broadcasting. I said, this is perfect. This is a perfect thing for you to do. And I said, it's not scripted, Brock. You can say whatever you want to say. And I really felt like we were on the same page because the book had been out. He read the book. We'd had enough discussions. I wasn't worried about it. And I probably should have been. So we got to Vancouver. We walked in, and we were all ready to go, and I'm so proud of him. And he's shaking everybody's hand. And there was representatives from Hockey Canada there. There was representatives from BC Hockey, and we're about to do this video series. And there was cameras, and the backdrop had the Hockey Canada. So for me, it was like a dream. I had never seen the book going that far. And so we sat down. They start filming. And the very first question they asked me is, what do you think you did well as a hockey mom? And I said, I think I was good on the rides home. And I started to talk. And as I'm talking, he's being filmed as well. And he's frowning. And he's like, and then he interrupts me on camera in front of all these. And he was like, I hated the car rides home. It's our first experience, honestly. And I went, cut. And then we watched it. And it was the most honest moment between a hockey mom and a hockey son. And the worst part about it was when I watched it after, what bothered me the most is I waited till he was 18 years old to have that conversation with him. I had no idea he felt that way. None. So how different it could have been for him had I asked him that question before. So I want to show you the first video in the series, and you will see that honest moment, and it's called Don't Force Your Passion.
My first time playing hockey didn't go as planned. I was 7 years old. We were at the old Memorial Arena in our hometown, and there was no glass in this rink. It was one of those old barns that had a lot of character, a lot of history. But when I stepped on the ice, I hated it immediately. I wasn't very good. I couldn't skate. I continued to go up to my coaches and ask them to get off and cry. and I would carry on, and when they weren't listening to me, I skated over to my mother and my sister, who are sitting in the stands exhausted because it's 6 o'clock in the morning and I'm crying and yelling and screaming, just asking for Tim Hortons. As much as I love the game now, it didn't start out that way. It wasn't love at first sight, and it was a really hard time that Saturday morning.
I was so excited. My husband had played, my brothers had played, and I thought, now I've got my son in it. We're going to go to the rink, and he's going to love it. And I dragged my young daughter out of bed at 6 in the morning, and off we went. And I could see in the car ride on the way there, he was getting a little apprehensive. And I said to him, go on the ice, do your best, and I'll get you a donut. When you're all done, I will get you a donut. So that was my first mistake. He went out on the ice. He proceeded to flail around. He started to cry. He then yelled at the coach and asked him to get off. And so I quit making eye contact with him and pretended I didn't really know whose kid he was, until he then skated over to me and started yelling, I want a donut. So it certainly didn't go as I had thought it would. And I had always grown up with hockey and just assumed that my child would love it and want to play. And it was a pretty bad experience. And I thought, this kid is never going to love hockey. This was me that loved it. And just because I loved it, I thought he would too. And that wasn't necessarily the case.
They just feel so much internal pressure. You know, they have enough pressure from their coach, but then you can see them the odd times either it's looking at their parents or they're worried about that ride home. When their season ends or their hockey career ends, they all say that that damaged their relationship with their parents. And I've seen it over and over again where kids say, you know what, some games I play because I hate my dad that day, or my mom.
I think we did a good job on the rides home. We weren't the kind of parents that yelled and screamed at them. And
I hated the car rides home. You barely let me get in the car before you started asking questions about the game.
cut.
I've seen that numerous times. My experience is that it happens more at the younger level.
This particular player was an elite player. Could not separate the father and the son. It eventually chased him out of the game. He made it all the way to pro, but that relationship never healed. I coach players. But that's been one of the things I've learned over time. This job would exhaust you if you try and coach both. So I make it pretty clear who I'm coaching.
I put a lot of pressure on myself to do well, just because I want people to recognize that I've played well.
I mean, I certainly try not to put pressure on them, but we talk hockey in our house probably way too much. I mean, my job is in hockey. I coach both the kids in some capacity or another, so the challenge for us is dinner time should be dinner time and family time, and trying to avoid talking about hockey and maybe talking about school and other important things in life. I have to kind of bite my tongue sometimes and change the conversation.
I didn't think I was being critical, but when I look back, I was. And my son picked up on it right away, the tone of my voice. And although it was coming from a good place, my heart's in the right place. I feel for him out there, and I want him to do well. I know what he's capable of doing. Sometimes I feel he's not meeting my expectations, and I don't want to be that kind of parent.
I think unless they're going to get involved and learn and be in it for the right reasons, and it's not just about their son or their daughter, but it's about the 15, 17, 20 players. And if they can look at it that way and look at themselves in the mirror at the end of that day and say, yes, I'm in it for the right reasons, then great, give back to the game, because we need more volunteers and volunteerism in general. Otherwise, the best thing they can do is be there, support the people that are giving their time.
We push the kids always with their sports, with their school, and we try to do it in a positive way. You know, sometimes you wonder a little bit after whether or not you said the right thing. I don't think we ever regretted it, but we tried to help them kind of achieve what they wanted to achieve.
Let your team do what they've been taught and not put so much pressure on them, because we know how to perform in certain situations. I feel like I've got a lot of expectations and things to live up to, and when I'm not, then I feel like people are upset with me, and so I just I've got to work a lot harder, I think, on and off the ice.
The more you push, the farther you push them away at the end of the day. So,
when I finally discovered my love for hockey, I was 8 years old, and we were at our family cottage with all my cousins, and my one older cousin had a pair of goalie pads with him. And I wasn't that good of a skater. I didn't really have the skill that hockey players have, so I put on the pads. He let me put on the pads. They went up to about my chin. I could just stand in a net. And of course, with my 40-year-old uncles, they weren't going to fire shots at their 8-year-old nephew, so I thought I was pretty good at it because they were going a little easy on me, or very easy on me. But I think that competitive nature in me made me love it because it actually seemed like I was good at it. And from then on, I was hooked. I liked being that guy that had the say in the game where I could either make or break it. And maybe I regretted that in the long run, but that's when I fell in love with it, when I put on the pads.
It was an eye-opening experience for me when I saw Brock fall in love with hockey. It was such a difference from the first time we had him on the ice when he played out to when he discovered goalie pads. He put them on and he would punch them, and he liked the feeling of the pucks hitting them, and you could just tell he felt like a bit of a superhero in net. And from that point on, he woke up ahead of us before practice. He was ready for games. There was no more crying on the ice. There was no more, I want to get off. He couldn't wait to get on. And I realized once he'd found the passion for the sport, how much easier it was and how much more fun it was for everybody. There wasn't effort to get him to the games. It was an easy transition because he loved it so much. And I think that's where parents get a little bit stuck when they are forcing their kids to do things. It shouldn't be work. They should love it. They should be wanting it more than you do, and it makes the whole experience better and a whole lot easier.
So this video series is free for anybody to use. It's on my website, lessonsfrombehindtheglass.com, and there's 10 videos, and it covers tryouts, it covers ice time, it covers talking to the coach, parental interference, everything, and they're just like that. They don't take a long time to watch. So I would encourage, if you're dealing with something, if a parent is struggling, refer them to the video series, and it kind of takes the onus off you. And we were able to get, Kirk McLean is involved in it, Trevor Linden was involved, we had some NHL players, like I said, some representatives from Hockey Canada. The ones about the referees are incredible. It was the most eye-opening interviews I had done. And since then, I've been able to write a few articles about that. And the things that referees are going through now, we're going to lose our referees if we're not careful. And we lose our referees, we lose hockey. So if you are finding there is some of that going on in the stands, that one's called Lesson 4. And so just have a look. Again, it's lessonsfrombehindtheglass.com, and it's under the BC Hockey tab. And it's there, and it's free for all of you to use for your associations. So I want to come back to the name of this event, Changing the Game. I remember when I was younger, and I'm sure most of you do, playing outside was a part of the everyday experience. Bernie and I were talking about this last night, that I'm the youngest of 9. So my mom made us go outside. You had to go outside because she just needed us out of the house. And in the wintertime, my sister and I used to make a fort underneath the picnic table because it would be so cold. But you dressed for it. And when it was raining, you dressed for it. You just went outside. And I think things are different now, as I said, for our youth. They have so much access to social media all the time. So if they're being bullied at school and they go home, that bully can still find them. When I used to have an issue with somebody at school, I would go home at night and there was one phone between 9 of us. There wasn't a chance I was on the phone with my friends about it. And again, going to the rink is the one place you can go where you have kids' attention for that full practice. You have their attention in the dressing room without the phone, without the social media in front of them. And it is such a good opportunity for them to hear something positive, to be around something they love, to learn something. And again, it's another way that hockey helps kids so much. They're struggling with their sexual orientation, their race, gender, bullying, and the struggles with mental health are at an all-time high. So in the town where I come from, we're struggling with an epidemic around suicide in our young male population. That's not to say it's not happening in our female population, but the majority of those we've lost by suicide have been male. As Peter mentioned in my introduction, my other passion is working with grief and bereavement. And I facilitate a course called Safe Talk. And Safe Talk is a course that helps people recognize the signs and symptoms of somebody who is thinking about suicide and how to get them the help that they need. We went to do a bereavement group in my hometown for parents that had suffered a loss by suicide. And we did it as a pilot project. And we didn't know if we were going to get any parents there. First group we did was full. Before we were done that group, we had a waiting list for the next group, and then the next group, and then the next group. It was a very, very scary time. And I'm sure there isn't a person in this room that hasn't been affected or couldn't tell me their own story. So I want to take a minute to tell you a story of how hockey helped a community heal after a devastating event that shook us all. So this is the story of Evan Hill. So this is Evan up on the slide. On June 22nd, 2015, I was at home with my 17-year-old daughter, Cora. I was feeling very excited because I'd been invited to be a panel member in Toronto at the Sponsorship Summit for Hockey Canada. My train was leaving at 1 o'clock, and I had just started to get ready. My daughter had just jumped on the treadmill, and I was busy packing. As I was getting my suitcase zipped up, I could hear my daughter yelling for me, and I thought she said, "I hurt myself." As she came closer to my room, it was clear why she was crying, and she said, "Evan killed himself." Before I go any further, I want to introduce you to Evan because he was much more than his death. He lived an incredible life that touched a lot of people. Evan was a 17-year-old senior in high school. He was a son to Shelley and Jamie Hill, and a younger brother to his 18-year-old sister, Cassidy. So Cassidy is Evan's sister, and the picture that we're going to pull up is her in her prom dress. And I remember she put her prom dress on and came up the stairs, and Evan said, "You look hideous." And he was actually really, really proud of her, and that was the relationship that they had. I remember when he was asked why he chose St. Teresa's as a high school of choice, and he said without hesitation, "I chose it for the hot chicks and the hockey." Evan was part of the hockey program and the football program at the school, and Evan was a goalie. He loved his friends, his family, and he loved hockey. So that is him at one of his friends' hockey tournaments. I spoke with his mom so she could approve of the presentation. And not only did she approve, but she wanted me to be clear that hockey never hurt Evan's mental health issues. Hockey helped with his depression. She said it was an escape for him. She knew for those 60 minutes on the ice or on the field, he was happy. She said he was always a dressing room clown and loved to have fun. She also told me that his teammates knew about his depression and accepted him in spite of it. He had battled with the disease from a very young age. Unfortunately for Evan, the fight became too difficult and he lost his battle on June 22nd. As I was attempting to console my daughter that day, my son came flying in the house. And Evan was a goalie and Brock was a goalie, they knew each other. And he consoled Cora and he turned around, he looked at me and he said, "Is Dad coming home?" And I said, "Yeah, he's on his way." And he said, "Well, Mom, you gotta go. You gotta go." And I said, "Well, I don't think I can go. I'm not gonna leave Cora here." He said, "You've made a commitment, Mom. You gotta go." And Cora said, "Mom, it's only one night. Go ahead, Dad'll be home." So my husband came home. My son Brock drove me to the train station. And as we pulled into the train station, my son got out of the car, came to the back of the truck, took my suitcase out, and he set it in front of me in a very determined way. And he said, "This is an important message, Mom. Get your head in it. Whatever else is going on, get your head in it." And I remember being kind of shocked, and I grabbed my suitcase and I said, "Okay, thanks," and I left. And I went and I spoke to Hockey Canada, and I came back the next day. And I started to think on the train about how many times Brock was going into a big game, or he was going in to do something, and something stressful had happened at school, or something upsetting had happened with his friends. And how many times my husband would pull up to the arena, lift up the trunk, hand him his hockey bag and say, "Get your head in it. No matter what else is going on, get your head in it." And I got home the next day and we talked to my daughter about going to the funeral. And we just wanted her to be prepared. So when we got there, I wasn't prepared. So we walked into the funeral, and when we arrived, the first thing we saw was Evan's goalie mask, painted. And then we saw his jersey. And then there was videos of him with his hockey team. And then there was his football jersey. And Cora and I were laughing as we were going through. Some of them were really funny. And then we sat down, and we thought it was the priest that was getting up or a minister to talk. And when the gentleman got up to speak, it had been his hockey coach. So his hockey coach did his eulogy. And he did an amazing job. And we were laughing one minute and crying the next. And then a young man got up to speak, and it was the captain of his hockey team. And he wanted to talk too. As we walked out of the funeral, being somebody who has done grief support for a very long time, it was the end of the school year, and I looked around at all the kids, and all I could think was, where are they going to get their grief support? There's so many of them. How are they going to be supported? And it was about 2 weeks later, my daughter came to me, and she said they are doing a ball hockey tournament in Evan's name at the school. So his friends from the hockey team contacted the principal and said, can we use the grounds for the school to do a ball hockey tournament? These are kids that couldn't have organized detention. And to the principal's credit, she let them. So they had the first game start at 7:30 a.m. And anybody that's ever tried to wake up teenagers, I was really worried. I pictured his parents getting there. I was scared that there wouldn't be people there. It wouldn't be full. So I had a group of kids at my house, and I got up, got them up early, and we pulled in to the schoolyard. And it was probably one of the most emotional moments ever because it was packed. It was packed. And I didn't give those kids enough credit. And when we opened up the car, all of his favorite music was playing. And it was music that they used to play in the dressing room. And one of the very, very best sights from that day, this is Cassidy. So this is the little girl that was in the prom dress, and it's Evan's sister. She never played hockey a day in her life, but for that day, she donned his hockey equipment, and she represented him. There were kids that had never played hockey that had no clue how to put their equipment on, but came that day so they could celebrate him and so that they could be together. One of the best pictures from the day, this is my favorite. So the team in yellow were all of Evan's friends. And I said to my daughter, Cora, who is the team in red? Because I had known all the kids from school. My kids were only a year apart. And she said, they don't go to St. Teresa's, Mom. These kids were a group that had lost their friends from another school, and they wanted to be together and play hockey in his honor. So as I look at Evan's story, and I think back to everything that he went through, hockey was the one thing in his life that brought him joy. And as his mom said, hockey didn't hurt his mental health, hockey helped his mental health. And if I look at his story, if hockey wasn't involved, I don't know what that would have looked like. And no, it's not a happy ending, and many times that's the case. But that was one part of his life that was so, so positive. So when all of you are here, and you're here on a weekend, and you're maybe not with your family, or you're getting emails from parents that aren't happy, or you're spending a ton of time running the roads, I just want to say how important you all are, and you have no idea the impact you're having on kids. And I think if we didn't have rooms full like this, we would lose our hockey experience. So don't ever, ever think what you're doing is not important. Because when all was said and done, they had 17 teams register, and there was close to 200 people in attendance. That little ball hockey tournament brought a community together, raised over $4,000 for children's mental health, but most importantly, it brought smiles back to a group of young men and women whose hearts were broken. Playing hockey became their grief group. And again, although Evan's story has a tragic ending, his mom wanted me to be clear that so many of the joyful moments in his life came from hockey and the people who surrounded him because of the game. So if I'm here to tell you the power of what hockey can bring to a player and their family, I believe that story tells it all. From Evan's mom wanting me to know how much sports has shaped his life, to my son's pep talk at the train station, and finally to the group of grieving youth that came together around a sport they loved. I believe that hockey prepares youth for defining moments that will shape them for the rest of their lives. As parents, we need to encourage that kind of positivity in our child's lives. We need to get out of the way and let them play. And I'm here today because it's one of my greatest regrets. So as I conclude my talk, I'm going to play one more video for you, and it's called Enjoy the Ride, the Game is Over Before You Know It. And when we ran this video series with Hockey New Brunswick, this specific video got 128,000 views. It's crazy. And I believe it's because parents genuinely set out to enjoy this. They don't even know they're not enjoying it until it's over, which is the hardest part. And my son just moved into his first home, and we were helping him move, and it was the craziest thing. At the end of the move, he said, Mom, did you clear out your trunk? Because Dad put some stuff in it. I said, I think so. I think I got everything. And I said, I'll just go and check. So I go and check, and I lift up the trunk, and there's his hockey pads. And now they've got duct tape on them. He's had them for so long. And there I stood on the street holding these hockey pads that reeked. And I was crying. I was crying because it was the first time those hockey pads weren't going into my garage. That part of our life together is done. Having the same schedule, having the same social life, being around those hockey parents, and he will go on to do other wonderful things, I know that. But this time that you have right now is so precious, and it flies by like that. So I'm going to be selling books after, if anybody is interested. They're $20. I did bring a credit card machine, but it's not working. So there is an ATM here. But I'm going to be donating a portion of the funds from today's sales to Kids Help Phone Manitoba. I just think any awareness that we can raise around kids and suicide and the help they need, if you notice something different in any of your players, tell somebody. It's not your job to fix everything, but just try and pay attention and tell somebody. So I'm going to play this last video. Enjoy the ride. The game is over. And I thank you all for having me today, and I've really enjoyed being here. Thank you.
I will never forget one day getting ready for Brock's game. And my husband and I were sitting in the living room. We were all ready to go. And up Brock came. He came up the stairs. He had his suit on. He was ready to go. My daughter had to work that day. And she came up and she had her uniform on. And Brock asked if he could have the car. He had just gotten his license and was quite excited. So we said sure. And she asked if he could drive her to work. So off the two of them went. Out the door they went. He drove her to work and he drove off to hockey. And my husband and I kind of looked at each other. And all of a sudden we were in a situation where our kids didn't need us to take them where they needed to go anymore. We went from driving all across Ontario, going to hockey games, being the hockey parents that waited for him after the game, and all of a sudden now he had his license, and that young man that needed help getting his bag up into the back of the car was now driving the car and not necessarily needing us to take him. And it was a difficult transition for us, and it happened like that. And I think parents need to remember that this time with your kids in the car and the conversations in the car are so precious because time flies.
There comes a time in every teenager's life where they no longer want to spend the weekends with their parents or their family. And it's not because they don't love their parents or their family, it's more because they have other things to worry about. They want to spend time with their teammates or their friends or maybe their girlfriend or boyfriend. Maybe they want to go to a party instead of going to a movie night with their family. It can be tough for parents because they don't see it coming. And when it does, you want to have those moments from when they're younger and their car ride home that you're going to remember and cherish. It's really when you can connect with your kid, and that's kind of the whole point of enjoying the ride and cherishing those moments, those lifelong memories that you're going to have forever. Because once they decide they're no longer wanting to spend that time with you on the weekends, it's never quite going to be the same.
I just read an article about this the other day, and I actually got choked up on the last game. This mom had written this article on the last game her son played. I think it was in midget. The years, the routines of getting coffee in the morning and getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I actually enjoy getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm one of those weird ones. I don't know, being a part of those moments. But that's going to transcend into other moments. So I can't say one particular thing. Yeah, it's been a great ride so far.
I'm going to miss the whole lifestyle, even with the parents, and driving them to the rink and driving them home and having those conversations and even not only conversations about hockey, just about life. So we've had the best conversations with my other sons as well, driving in that car.
You only have your son or daughter playing hockey for really it's a short time frame. If you can find pleasure in it, it's a lot better than feeling that frustration and anger. I think that's what your book is about, is touching on some of these points of trying to be, a little bit open to hopefully making a good experience for everybody involved.
As your kids get older, you don't necessarily have that time. You're busy with your work, they're on doing their own thing, then they're growing up and doing stuff with their friends. You just are able to spend a lot of time, and you should embrace that because it goes by really quickly.
I think the biggest thing is seeing the enjoyment in it. I think I probably feel everything as a parent. You feel their frustration when they've had a bad shift, or they're not getting as much ice time as they want to. You're just almost in tears when you see them succeed and reach the goals that they wanted, whether it's individually from a game or even a team standpoint.
Just support your son or your daughter in the best way possible, and have a big picture in mind. So even if he's playing at a competitive level, the reality is, his hockey career is going to end eventually. And then when you look back, you have to say, what was it all worth? Was it really worth going crazy about ice time, one game, or winning the championship or whatever? It has to be about life lessons, because it's got to be all worth something in the end. So it's got to be, did he become a better person? Is he a better teammate? Did he become a better player? Did he give his best? And did he love the sport? That's what it has to be about.
Just step back and enjoy it. I think everyone gets far too wrapped up with the end of the journey as opposed to the great moments that they'll share today. For example, we look at the end and the big dream as opposed to the moments that those boys will share and remember when they're 35 years old, sitting around maybe having an adult beverage and been going, remember when we were in that tournament, remember, which we all do. And I think that's what we need to step back and remember.
One of the best things about minor hockey was all of the family time it provided. We got to spend so much time together. Our schedules were the same. I knew where my kids were. I knew who their friends were. And not only did I know who their friends were, I knew who the parents of the friends were. It also became our social life. And this will be one point in your life that you have the same social life as your kids. And that is invaluable because it doesn't last forever. So I would encourage you, enjoy this time, enjoy the time, enjoy the ride. All the time you get in the car, at tournaments, all those great conversations. And as busy as you are right now, use that time to have great conversations and spend time with family. It goes by so fast. For more information on the Lessons from Behind the Glass video series, visit bchockey.net or lessonsfrombehindtheglass.com.